going on, everyone? It is Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent. We have an incredibly special guest today. We have with us record masterer Maor Appelbaum of Maor Appelbaum Mastering. He's worked with artists such as Meatloaf, Yes, Faith No More, and so many more. Maor, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So we start the interview off with the same question every time. If somebody says to you in a sentence, this is secondhand talent, no context. What's the what do you think of when you hear the term secondhand talent?
Well, it's a good question, but you know, words can have a lot of meanings. So, secondhand talent would be like maybe someone is influenced by someone else. Secondhand talent would be maybe one is riding on someone else's success. Uh, I guess there's so many ways to look at it. And it could be also just a name to create an interest, like
Yeah,
provocative, you know.
well, all great answers, and the best part about that question is there is no wrong answer. I didn't know what it meant a year ago from the time of this filming. It's been an evolving process, and I'm adding to my understanding of what it means as I continue to grow in this program. And one of the great one of the great things that I've been able to do with this program is to platform not just people and professionals that I respect in the industry, but also to highlight the parts of the industry that they represent. It's been really important for me to have a record master on the show because I feel like that is one particular area where and tell me your experience with this, but I feel like it's something that the general public there's a lack of like real detailed information on what does it mean to master a record. Is that something that you've experienced? Sounds about right.
Eh, I would say to some extent, yes. Our profession is called mastering engineer, and we're an engineer in the process of the production, and we're involved in the mastering stage, which is the final part of the production before it gets replicated, distributed, released, whatever it is. Of course, after us, there's the whole marketing and promotion side and administrative side, but we're the last creative, artistic, and technical part of the production where, that's the last minute changes if they happen, and we're responsible for the final presentation of the art. It could be little, it could be a lot. Sometimes we're very involved in stuff. Sometimes our involvement is more minimal. Uh, there's a chance to make changes, to the sound. You want it brighter, darker, louder, more penetrating, more, exciting, more aggressive, or more soft or smooth. There's a lot of ways to take it. Basically it's about presentation. And one of the best analogies to explain that for people is basically when you go to a museum or an art gallery and you look at a picture, the picture itself is not on its own. Even if it's just stuck on the wall is part of the picture now in terms of the presentation. It's like a big frame. Or if there's a frame to the picture, that changes how you see the picture. So let's say the production in the mix at the end of the result is what the picture is. The frame you put around it, either metal frame, wood frame, plastic frame, no frame, that affects how it's been looked at. Then also the lighting, whether it comes from above, below, the sides, or all of the above, and also the color of the wall that it's on. Everything will change the perspective of the picture, and it will emphasize or de-emphasize the contrasts in the picture. And the contrast in brightness or darkness, and also the coloration of it. If you're going to a certain direction with the colors, the light will emphasize that. So mastering is the art of presentation,
Mm.
and sometimes we need to do very little because it's really good. There's nothing to really change except a few things just to kind of frame it right. And in other cases, we need to do more things to it um, to shape it right. So our
And that
involvement is on both, the creative, artistic, but also on the technical side, how it's translating outside.
And that's a combination of working with your own technical process and experience, as well as, like you said, it could be big, it could be small. It's what the client, at the end of the day, the product that they're looking to achieve. And if I'm understanding correctly, your role is to understand and be able to operate the technology to get what what they're trying to create to translate that vision into a reality.
We have to remember, it's art. You're dealing with art. So even if you have technical tools to achieve that, you still have to be in the realm of art. So whatever you're taking it to any direction, it has to fit with that artistic vision, and it has to emphasize it or extend it to a degree. So the technology is basically tools of the trade, but you're really dealing with decision making, aesthetics, and understanding the vision of the artist and conveying that, or just not ruining it too.
Right, either or. But no, but I picked up on something you just said there, which I mean, it's one of the hottest topics I think right now, AI, artificial intelligence, and what those applications are. And I I love that your perspective is that it's an extension of the art, and that art inherently requires us to be involved, right? Uh, there's no AI that can compare to a personal human being, individual, intellect, perspective, capabilities. It really is so important to have that human element in it because like you said, you're creating art and you don't want this art to be something that's just, we make it and then we push it away. There's care that goes into it. Like you mentioned, there's lesser involvement, more involvement, depending on whatever the situation calls for. But that human involvement being necessary, I think, is a very important point. Um, in as we continue to develop in this world where other processes may take over. uh
By the way, just I do think AI will take over. It's just a matter of not. Um, it's not that the replacement is not coming from that it could do what the human can do. The replacement would come from the acceptance of what it does is good enough.
uh
So if people will be happy with the results and don't feel like they need more, then they will go for that. Same thing will happen with, from mastering to mixing to production to songwriting to art. It's a matter of acceptance. If people accept it, they will go for it. Regarding the human touch, yeah, human touch is important, but the future takes things out of a lot of things. It's like the more technology progresses, a lot of times we think we're evolving. We're not evolving in a lot of cases. We're actually going backwards, but we're letting technology do that for us. So, um, if mastering can be replaced by AI, well, it will be replaced if people will be happy with the result and not look for any human touch to it. Same thing will go for mixing, production, songwriting, visual arts, everything. We have to understand that with AI, there's no such thing as we're dabbling with AI or playing with AI. Everything you try with an AI, you're basically teaching it. Like if you now try to read a AI script and see what it's doing, or playing with audio and AI. You're not playing. You just gave him information of
Yeah.
what do you accept as good. So basically, AI is learning all the time. Now, not everything is AI. Some is algorithmic. Some it's certain algorithms that have formulas in them and it just works. But some platforms can actually learn from the usage.
Right. Like it's very difficult for me to I could see AI writing jokes maybe, but I don't it doesn't AI isn't going to influence your stage presence, for example.
Well,
Like,
that's because right now you're only looking at the aspect of the the vocal element of the jokes, the audio portion. But if AI was to do kind of a screen, if there was a screen and there was an image, and that image was controlled also, and will learn the gestures of how to like look funny, weird, or then that will be the same. We have to remember that every person has a personality and a touch to what they're doing, but there's also common denominators in different things where people are accepting. Okay. One of the good examples is, in today's industry, there's a lot of audio samples that are being used all the time. If for drums, there's audio samples of guitar amplifiers. There's plugins that are being used the same way a lot of times, and people are learning from each other. You find yourself listening to very similar audio productions. They're not the same, but they're similar. The reason they're not the same is because they don't know exactly how to copy it. But an AI would be able to copy it one per one because it will learn the math behind it. Even if there's a feeling to it, it will quantify it in a certain way. But if you repeat that a bunch of times, it becomes the standard. So, not thinking we can be replaced is not understanding that the replacement doesn't come from our personal touch as much as if you replicate something for a long period of time, it becomes a standard. Okay. I mean, look at Star Wars. You have
sure.
different figures there, right? And you have a lot of stormtroopers. The stormtroopers are different inside, but they're not really different because they're cloned. You know what I mean? Right? And they do the same thing unless they break the habit. But like they might be different because each one is cloned, but on a biological level, there might be a difference, right? Might be. But at the end, they're programmed the same, or they're going by the same orders, or you know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, even if there's discrepancies between things, they can still run similar based on a common denominator. So that's why, when people are asking me, is it a grim future in terms of AI? I don't look at it as a grim future or not. I'm just looking at it as a future. Whether we keep our profession or not, that's a different case. It's the same thing when phone cameras became very good. The quality became good. A lot of photographers lost business because now you could just use your phone and do it. Same with videographers. Okay. Also, the quality is good enough that people are not even looking for higher quality. They're accepting, let's just do a video with this phone. People accept that video quality. In broadcasting, it's a different case, but even that can change, if the quality of those videos will be higher and people will consume them more. It's really about the consumption of it. And, the consumer actually dictates the result. There's things that were very high quality and the consumers didn't accept, so they went for lower quality. Take an example in MP3. It's lower quality than a WAV file, but most people will listen to an MP3, and it's decent enough. It sounds quite good. It's not like a full resolution high wave, WAV file, you know, but uh still accepted. So
And one of the things I think that uh is very, very great explanation of it. One of the things that I think perturbs me the most about it though is this idea that if it's going to be good enough, to a great enough number of people. Right. That's really what we're looking at, if I'm hearing you correctly, that it's this have we reached a level of where, and by we, just like general public, have we reached a level where we're okay with how this sounds? We don't need to pay, let's say pay more to have it refined in a different way or specialized. Unfortunately, as you were talking, one of the first things that came into my head was along with you, probably fall into a very small category of people that truly care about those little differences and those little elements that really make it, like, the thing, it's and you're absolutely right. It is the future. It's not a matter of if or when. This is something that we need to reckon with, and I think the sooner we do so, the better. I think of my friends who are producers who have studios, and I, it's just I'm hopeful that it's not a group that sees wants to find something that's good enough just to go with, but of course, market dictates so many other things, what's more, cost effective at the end of the day, and, it's a shame because as a, I will admit it, self-described audiophile, have a wall full of records over there. It matters how they sound and how they listen and how you hear them. For me, I'm one of those people that truly appreciates the work that goes into making that final product. Um, I know there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people that share that, but the general public, I think the MP3 is a great example. Um, it would have been more costly to produce, CDs with WAV files or FLAC or anything above MP3, and people heard it and it was compressed, but most people don't know what that even means. That the audio is kind of compressed down to, make it work for this solution.
And by
And
the way, MP3s are not that bad. They actually sound good.
oh,
Okay.
sure, yeah.
If you have a good resolution MP3, it sounds good and it's acceptable, and radio stations can work with them, and a lot of them actually do. Um, Regarding sound quality, at the end of the day, you want the music to touch you and engage you. And every part of the process, from the production and the arrangement and the mixing and the mastering, you want to improve upon the engagement. You want the listener to embrace himself with the music, immerse himself. It doesn't have to be immersive Atmos, but more, connect to. And even in mastering, which is the final part, that's one of the things we want to do. We want to engage the listener more with the music. We want to make them feel like it's caressing them or embracing them or immersifying them, whatever you want to call it. Uh, that is dependent on results of the quality and understanding what works. This type of discussion goes also for resolution, but not every time high resolution actually works better. Sometimes the high resolution will reveal problems like noises and stuff that in lower resolution you don't hear. So not everything has to be high res to deliver what the actual sound should be. Sometimes the format that is a bit more limited in resolution, like a 16-bit 44:1, like a CD quality, is not only enough to deliver the results, sometimes it actually works better than something of a high res where you're starting to hear the noise floor, the hiss, the hum, the other stuff that just comes in. So to sum that up is that, quality matters to those who see it matters. Quality doesn't matter to those who just look at it as we don't need that. It's accepting, you know, it's accepting it is as is. And if it's lower quality, but they like the song, they'll accept it. Of course, the better it is, the better it's going to translate on other systems and lower quality systems and MP3s and all that. So you want to start with something better, going somewhere less better. But overall, the results can translate further and not. And even vinyl, a lot of times vinyl doesn't sound that good because there are not many pressing plants in the world. There are not many cutters anymore as they used to be. The quality assurance goes down because there's a lot of vinyl being made and less time to actually work it right. So even with those formats, it's not that easy to keep it good because of such a huge demand and so little amount of pressing plants in the world and cutting engineers and materials. So
One of sorry, I was
yeah, so what I'm saying is that, a lot of times technology can work as a double-edged sword because you're going for one direction, but now you're cutting on the other direction and you're hurting it.
sure. I mean, with vinyl specifically, I feel like part of, or for me anyway, part of the allure is that it doesn't sound perfect. You're absolutely right. There, and that, but that makes to me, my feeling anyway about that is that it makes it more unique. It makes it a more special feeling. If you put on a record, in your home, and it just gives you another sense in your level of, interacting with that art. You mentioned a few terms as we've been going along, that I would love for you to kind of maybe explain to our audience a little bit. You talk about, brightening and the warmth and all of these different, what I think most people would hear and consider to be physical, attributions, applying that to the music. I was hoping maybe if you could give an example of what warmth in the tone of music, what a good example of that could be, like when we say something like that, or
These
brightness.
words are very subjective.
Mm,
One would see warmth as a smooth character. One would see them as a high end being kind of lush. One would see them as more dull. One would see it as like there's so many explanations to warmth. Same with smooth. Bright is probably less because you understand that bright means that the high end is more open or the low end is much tighter and cleaner, so that way it represents the high end better. But still, when someone says I like a warm sound, you're really trying to decipher what they mean. There's times where they say warm, but they mean cold, which you
mm,
don't know.
right.
Sometimes they mean warm because it's louder. Sometimes they mean warm because it just it feels cozy. I think a lot of times the terms are really between um, the person who's working on it, the person who's receiving it, and if they meet uh, on the same place, it's like, I made it warm. Does this sound warm enough for you? Yes. Okay, then we're in the same place. And if they say no, it's not warm enough, then okay, let's get it warmer. So a lot of these terminologies, they're very subjective, and it's really all about translation. So one will translate warmth as one thing, and one way as something else.
So more of that individual, element, kind of really being in tune with the artist behind the music, and kind of relating that to them directly on a case by case basis.
Yeah, yeah. The work is what you do, but um the translation is what you transmit and they receive, and you don't know if what you're saying is going to translate the same. Hopefully you're trying to do that. Even on an artistic vision, you're making changes and you want to make sure that those changes apply well to the listening side, which is the artist and the production and people involved. It's a in a way it's a guessing game. You're guessing that you're going by your intuition, your gut feeling, your expertise, your skills, your experience, and hoping that works with them the way you thought it should work.
So, what's it like when a band like Faith No More, for example, approaches you and says, we want to work with you to press a record, or the band like Yes or Meatloaf, has there ever been a moment where, or I guess what would have been the first moment where you've been approached to do some mastering work by a band where you were like, oh wow, like this is something. This is a project that young me would be looking up and saying, "Yeah, buddy."
I think that applies to not only young me, but young me, current me, and probably future me too. When you work with bands you appreciate, you either grew up on or known the legacy or respect what they're doing, the art and the sound, and it's exciting. It excites you because one, you feel honored to be working on it, just to be, offered to do it. And then that can also put you in a spot where you're like, am I doing the right thing? Is my gut feeling taking me to the right place? And sometimes it does. Sometimes you miss the mark. Sometimes you're like, no, you're overthinking it. Maybe you're not going with your gut. Sometimes your gut is telling you things that are wrong, and not because your gut feeling is wrong as much as that your gut feeling is that that the insecurities can come in to place, or sometimes you're over secure and you're making mistakes because you're thinking they'll accept it as is, because it's so complicated, to go with your intuition and gut feeling, because if it works, then you say, well, I went with my intuition. But if it doesn't work, what do you say? I
Right.
went with my
Right.
intuition. It's like, so,
Yeah.
anytime you work with a band that you like the music, even if it's an unknown band, but you really like what they're doing, you're in that spot of like, is this good? Is this good enough? Is this showcasing what they're doing? Will they like it? Of course, it could be a band that's not good too, but you're doing your job, right?
Sure.
But answering your question, like Faith No More, yes, Meatloaf, yeah, every record that I came in to work with these, legacy pioneering bands and these amazing artists, always follows with excitement, and um it makes you a bit you know maybe worried, maybe wanting to make sure it's right. It's like walking on eggs sometimes.
Yeah, like
you know
you get in your own head, and
yeah, it can. I
yeah.
mean, there's records I've done for some bands that I was more in my zone and I knew what I'm doing. And there's bands that I worked with that I thought I knew what I was doing, and then I had to reestablish it, and redo it, and it worked, and sometimes not. There's times where you're not sure, but somehow you do it and you get there. But again, it's a very case by case, and that's why some records just they get handed to different people, and even the good ones lose the gig to someone else.
Absolutely. I mean, in looking up, some of the work you've accomplished and some of the albums that you've worked on, uh, you know, obviously a lot of translation into, my own musical sensibilities. There's certainly a lot of albums on there. I had those CDs when I was growing up. And to see those represented kind of all in one place, I think also speaks to the ubiquity of mastering, and then how and that these technical skills that you've learned throughout your career and experience, you know, have really translated to a wide range of artists from a genre perspective as well as from a generational perspective. I mean, there's younger bands, older bands, eh, really a fascinating spectrum that you've worked on, and I think that's a testament to, to your prowess, as a masterer. So we're hearing, we've been talking a lot about mastering an album and, the touch that adds. And one thing that's been happening a lot, we're seeing a lot of releases of older albums that have been remastered. And for our listeners and viewers, of this program, uh, I think that it would benefit to have some kind of explanation of what does it mean when we're remastering an album? Like what goes into that? Why do we do it? And we could talk about your most recent project, remastering the Gatherings album, Always.
Sure. Now, we have to remember a few things about mastering. It's not just an album. You can do mastering for singles, EPs, albums, compilations, uh, for video, videos of songs. Each one requires a different thing. When you master a single, it's just on that song, regardless of anything else. When you're doing an EP or an album, then you have a collection of songs that might have a story behind them or a timeline behind them that you need to master to keep the consistency and cohesiveness of the whole sound. When you're doing a compilation, then there's not really a cohesiveness and consistency because there's different eras, but you still want to keep the listener kind of connected with it on the volume levels or tonal changes. Um, when you remaster a project, um, you can remaster it from different sources. A lot of times the original mixes are long gone and very hard to find. Sometimes you find yourself remastering from a master that always already was done. And sometimes you're remastering from a remaster that was already remastered because that's what's given. And in other cases, you get the original tapes to work with or a digital capture of those tapes. What's important in the remastering process is to be faithful to the result that was already existing in the mastering if it was a good one. If it wasn't a good one, then you try to take it to a different direction, which is much better. But if you're looking at an original master that was really good, the idea of the remastering was to improve upon it based on what the technology can give you today. And then what was missing before, you can emphasize, if there's more clarity and depth, detail. If back then there was not enough low end or high end, and now you can boost it or fix it in a certain way that will sound better, then that's one of the things you can do. Um, Not every remaster is from the actual source that's the original. Sometimes those remasters are from safety copies, and then they're not always sounding exact the same as the original. Sometimes it was a DAT tape that was connected to the console, but the original master was done from a half-inch or quarter-inch tape that was connected, or or it could be just a copy of a copy, which then you have generation loss, and depends how good they kept the tapes. So when a remaster is done, not always you get the right source material to work with, and hopefully you do. But if you don't, that can of course um, change the outcome. And sometimes you find later on the original master, but before that you found another version of it which you thought was the original. And some remasters are actually remixes. They're called remasters because, yeah, it is a remaster, but they're actually new mixes. They found the original tapes of the tracks and they made a new mix that sounds different. And then you're mastering a remix. So they will still call it a remastered because it's not the original, it's a remaster, but you're really mastering a new mix. So remix and remastered. Um,
Okay, all right, and yeah, I've heard that term before, and I honestly did not know exactly what that meant. So thank you for clarifying that for me. And obviously the source material, you want to get the cleanest, best source material possible. Um, but you're saying it's not. nothing's impossible when it comes to at least trying to, work with audio in whatever format it's received.
No, no, it's not that nothing is impossible. It's just that if you get something that doesn't sound that great, even if you're improving it, it's not going to sound that great.
Right.
Like you have
The
to work
the
with what you're
ceiling is
getting.
only so high, right?
Right. And
Like,
then
yeah,
sometimes you get something that sounds okay, but they want to change because some of these remasters are done by labels that want to have a different version, or like the A&R wants a different sound. Even if they liked what was before, sometimes they want another take on it. So a remaster can go so many directions, from how original sources you're working with. And sometimes the original mastering that was done was the right thing for the sound that people liked. And if you get the original mixes, they don't sound the same. And now there's a missing link here. Why that master originally sounded that good, and you're trying to do that with the mixes, and it just doesn't sound that right, like in the way you wanted, because the master was doing a lot of stuff to it. And now when you're getting the original mixes, they don't translate the same as what the result was then. So then you have to learn how it should sound and maybe get there, or you need to take the actual master. So the whole world of remastering is a very complicated and convoluted, and it's very dependent on the material coming in, the how good it is, how good condition it is, because that affects too. And it could be a very big hit or miss. Also, you want to make sure you're not alienating the audience from what they know. There's always going to be people who will say, "Oh, but I like the original," because
sure,
they got
sure.
used to it. But also, when t taking that in mind, if your remaster is alienating it from what it should be, not in a good way, then people might not like that. And there were eras that some remasters were done that way, where they were just crank the level and make it, you know, sounding different, not in a positive way, just for the sake of remastering. But sometimes, again, that's what the A&R wanted, and they wanted that type of sound. Sometimes they just want another take on it that has a different sound. And for them, it's like, well, maybe it doesn't have the fullness of this, but it has kind of a nice feel, and maybe it works. So good, bad, that's kind of the in the eye of the beholder, or in the ear of the beholder, and there's different ways to approach it. um but it's not uncommon nowadays to see that records were remixed and remastered, and I've done a bunch of those records. The Gathering, for example, always, that record was remastered a long time ago already, but this version that I worked on was actually remixed. So the whole mix sounds different than the original, and the original record, I know it from when I was a teenager, and I liked the music on it. But of course, the quality back then was different because they recorded and mixed it, in a different environment than what now was possible to do with the original tracks and remixing them. So now it got more power and energy. And of course, I took that and I mastered that, which you can say remastered that, but basically it's a mastering of a new mix, of a remix.
Got
So
it.
remix and remastered. It was a pleasure doing it because I know that record. As a teenager, and that was a breakthrough record in that field of metal. It was quite
Yes.
new to do those things, and that's one of the records, that I've done, that I remastered. I've done records for Fight, which was Rob Halford's band. I've done a box set for John Wetton with 8 CDs. Six of them were solo albums that he's done that I remastered and added bonus tracks to them, and then two more records that were just unreleased materials. Um, I've done a lot of other like remasters for vinyl only. I did like two records with Slaughter. Uh, uh, was Hear No Evil and The Wildlife. Uh,
Wildlife is a phenomenal album. Yeah, that's you've been listing out all of these incredible projects, and mentioning that I mean, having an album close to your heart, I mean, makes it a more special project to work on. For you with the Gatherings album, I'm sure that kind of as you said, it was closer experience for you because you
Yeah.
already had that deep connection with the music. It does make me curious, is there particular project or two that stand out that you've worked on that you really were like, "Well, I am so grateful that I got to be a part of this
Yeah.
process." Like, are there any that stand out in your head?
You mean in remastering or in mastering?
Um, Either or both. Which
Well,
I mean, like this is more so like, your discography is quite extensive, and the range of materials you've worked on and artists you've worked with is very extensive. And I'm throughout the whole process. I mean, for me, I come at front to this from more of like a music listener and fan perspective. So in my mind, when I'm asking the question, it's less from a technical perspective and more just so from like a feeling, like,
mhm. Yeah, sure.
so I'd be curious to hear, if there's a handful that or one or two that really, made you feel some kind of way.
I think most of the records I've worked with, the people involved with it or worked on the record was like that. Like when I got to do Faith No More's comeback album, Soul Invictus, and the two singles prior to it that were different mixes and different masters, and also another single afterwards, which was a different master. That was amazing for me. And then a year after, I got to remaster the first album, We Care a Lot, the deluxe band edition, which includes the original album plus a bunch of bonus tracks from different demo versions of the songs. That was amazing for me. Bands like Yes, which I've done about, I think, 6 records, one studio album and 5 live albums. Uh, yeah, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. And then, Meatloaf and bands like Sabaton and Sepultura and Cynic and Dokken and Armored Saint and um, the Meatloaf album I mentioned. And then The Gathering, I did a studio album for them and an EP and then that remaster. And I used to work a lot with Rob Halford on his solo band Halford, and I've done Yngwie Malmsteen. And I mean, there's a ton of records I've done that I'm very proud of the, whatever came there, with it, the outcome of it, the chances to, wow, what's the chances I'll be doing it? Like I've done like 3 albums with
Sure.
Eric Gales, and he's an amazing guitar player and musician. It was a pleasure working with him. And I did 2 records for Walter Trout,
Well,
a record for William Shatner. And so I think most records that I'm involved with, uh, you know, Overkill and Voivod and I've done some songs, I've done a song for Dream Theater and for, there's so many things that I'm just like, wow, I can't believe, I'm doing this. I did a solo album for Mike Mangini, who at that time was the drummer for Dream Theater. It, you know, you work with people who create art and you're loving that art or you're respecting that art and appreciating it. So it stands out, of course, in time, the more you do, um, the more of those fill your heart and brain. And there's a point where some of them sometimes you forget and sometimes you get reminded again, and every record is a situation you go into. There's circumstances, there's a timeline, there's deadlines, there's budgets, there's uh results, you got to work with. And it's fun. That Slaughter record, the Wildlife that I did, that was a limited edition for fans. It's a vinyl limited run, which has the whole album remastered specifically for that. And there's another vinyl with it that has demo tracks of that album, and then another vinyl with live versions of it. It was a pleasure doing this. It's the whole box set thing. It's, you know, um, I really love what I'm doing, and working on a record is not easy. It has its challenges, but when you finish a record and you're like, wow, this came out really cool, and you're proud of it, you're happy, and you know that you've been a part of it, and someone else listens to it and like it. And if they know you worked on it and they acknowledge your work, that's even much fun. It's an
And,
experience.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but recently you did some work with one of our guests from last season, John Hines from Big Old Nasty Get Down.
Yes.
Um, I, out of curiosity, as a friend of the show, shout out John, love you, buddy. Uh, what was it like working with some of the more funky stuff?
It's fun. I've done a lot of funky stuff in the past. Um, I've done even industrial funky stuff. I've done like a lot of music that has reggae and funk and different grooves, and uh these songs that I did for him, they were quite really great because they have great groove, good vibe, good sonics. Fabrizio Grossi mixed them, and they worked with him on production, and it was fun. I think they came out really cool. There's like different players on the songs, and it's like it goes across the gamut of, funk and rock and different genres. It was fun, and I really enjoyed that process. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's so wonderful for me, to be here and having interviewed John for last season and to be interviewing you now and kind of seeing these lines start to get drawn, from points in time. I'm understanding more and more when when you say how you're a part of a project and it's something that you are into, and then you amass this kind of body of work, and then you're looking back and you're like, oh wow, like it's it may be, yeah, it may be kind of facetious to pick a favorite or to pick just one or to it and it's also great to hear about how it transcends genres, that it's not, fixed to anyone in particular. One final thing that I want to talk about, because I know we are running out of time here today. There are different types of mastering and there's different types of equipment used. And I was hoping that you could talk to our audience a little bit about what's some of the gear that goes into mastering a record.
So the gear can be analog, like tube and solid state. It could be digital hardware, like boxes that have digital devices in them, and then it could be plugins, which is software. And you can work with all of them together or separate. At the end of the day, even if you're working analog, if your outcome is digital, then you need to go into digital. And the gear that be is used is, one is you're using a DAW, like a Pro Tools or any other device to record. Okay, it could be any Pro Tools, Pyramix, 80, Samplitude, Sequoia, Reaper, Ableton, Logic, Cubase, Nuendo, Fruity Loop,
Sure,
whatever.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, whatever device you need. Okay, and then you have the interface. What interfaces between the computer, either to your monitoring or to your chain, and the interface has a digital to analog converter for you to listen to it or to pitch it to the gear. And then you have an analog to digital converter, which takes the analog back to digital. That's if you're using analog and digital. But if you're just working what they call in the box, like in the computer, then you only need a digital to analog converter so you can put your headphones in or speakers. And that could be also just in an interface that has it. And then the actual gear that you might be using, either plug-in or hardware, you'll use equalizers, compressors, limiters, coloration boxes that have a certain sound to them. Um, it could be saturators, it could be multiband compressors, could be or multiband limiters. It could be stereo wideners. There's different tools that you can work with. Sometimes you need more of them, sometimes you need less. Sometimes it's enough to have one or two, just finding the right point of reference to work with them and then working with it. Sometimes you need to combine a lot of them to shape it in a certain way. Basically, um, some projects need a lot of work, but in little increments. Some projects need a lot of work with big increments. Some projects just need a few little increments. That's all. So each project is a challenge on its own, and you find what works best to your opinion. Um, but the tools are today you have a lot of them in the computer. It doesn't mean they all sound exactly how the analog does, but sometimes that's a better fit than the analog.
Now, looking at a body of work and having this collection of albums that you've worked on and this incredible range of artists from, Meatloaf to Walter Trout, like you mentioned. Uh, is there an artist out there that you really would love to work with? Is there somebody who's been on your kind of vision board of like, this is a band or an artist for me, like this would be a dream come true to work on this music or this art.
I think there's so many of them because I'm a music lover and fan that if I state one,
Right. Oh,
not going to
sure.
be
Yeah.
enough. But there's so many. I think, you know, I would love to work with a lot of legacy artists that I grew up listening to, which is a huge amount of them anyway. So it's going to be a huge number. But, at the end of the day, if I like the music and I like the production, it could be even a new artist that I don't even know, and it might be amazing. To me, it's really about, understanding the emotional impact of the record and enhancing it. And if that comes from a legacy artist, great. If it comes from a new artist, great as well. Um, Sometimes there's really amazing records that come in from bands that nobody knows,
Mm,
and they're starting, but they're really good.
mm.
So, and sometimes you can get disappointed by more established bands too, because maybe they didn't do such a great record musically or sonically. So, you know, instead of just saying, "Oh, I would love to work with these people," I would say I would love to work with a lot of the bands I grew up listening to or from eras that I've been part of and new things that can come my way that are interesting.
And I think that's actually the best answer you could have given because, this show is all about keeping traditions alive and passing down that love of music. And, I think that's actually a really great answer to wanting to kind of be a part of carrying on those legacies and carrying that music into future generations. That's kind of what secondhand talent is all about, and I really couldn't have put it any better way myself. Maor, thank you so much for being on the show. You could check out all of his links in the description down there. Thank you, Tenacious Toys, of course, for the lovely desk candy. We appreciate you. Shout out John Heinz again. Love you, buddy. Friend of the program. Maor, thank you again so much for being on the show.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me here.
All right, and this is Steiner with another episode of Secondhand Talent, and we'll see y'all next Wednesday. Next podcast.